Hello, this is Ness Tillson here. This is a little video to give you an overview of the measuring tool that you have in Polyboard. In the latest versions of Polyboard, we've set up a new measuring tool where you can add dimensions to a specific project. This tool is only active in the project mode. So let's go into Polyboard and see how this dimensioning tool works. First of all, you have to set up a new project, of course, and here we have a little project I've set up, and I've added a few dimensions. Let's get rid of the dimensions and just show you how they work. To get rid of the dimensions, I'm going to go into View, and click Delete Permanent Dimensions, and all dimensions disappear. Let's quit the the measuring tool, and the measuring tool works like this. When you're in project mode, you go into the menu measuring tool, and you have three possibilities. You can measure 3D measurement, which means that you'll be able to click in 3D space and make dimensions, put in dimensions on your drawing that are inclined in space. Or you can lock the measuring tool onto a vertical direction, so any points that you click will be only measured vertically or horizontal measurements. Let's have a look at what the 3D measuring tool does for beginning. What you have to understand as well is that Polyboard, when I click 3D measuring tool, we go into the measuring mode where we can add dimensions. You have to understand that Polyboard is not working like a CAD program and clicking onto points. In fact, Polyboard is the measuring tool is only to add dimensions or to measure the general dimensions of a project. For instance, in this project here, as I move over points, there is nothing really happens here, and I can click and there's nothing happens. What I can actually measure between are significant edges. Significant edges in a project are in fact the significant edges of a surface that you've added using the project mode. So for instance, walls, here we have a wall. If I move over the wall, note that as I move over the different corners of the wall, edges of the wall, the edges go red, and I am able to, if I click when the edge is red, I can now drag the dimension point, shall we say, over to another red edge, and when I get to that edge and I click, Polyboard will actually display the measurement between those two edges. And here we have the measurement of 2 meters 100, that is 2,100 millimeters. If I go continue clicking on edges, for instance, if I want the thickness of this wall here, and I click on this edge and I move it over to the other edge, it goes red, and I click again, it will display the distance between the two vertical edges here. And we have 50 millimeters, which is the thickness of our wall. But the other dimension has completely disappeared. If I want the dimension to stay, I move the mouse over the dimension, or the number, click right, and click in the menu Permanent Dimension. And Polyboard will sling up here a permanent dimension now. A little bit closer. It's slung up a dimension line with its leaders and everything, and I've got 50 millimeters, which is marked up here. If I continue now measuring, for instance, if I want to measure the distance now between this edge here and this edge here, and I want to make this a permanent dimension, I click right and click Permanent Dimension, and Polyboard has now added a permanent dimension here. I can continue doing this, for instance, clicking here. As I'm in 3D space, I can click on the actual 3D edges here. So I click the height of the wall. If I click right, permanent dimension, and Polyboard will add the 2 meters 50 as a permanent dimension here. When adding dimensions to the actual cabinets, one has to be aware that we're actually doing the same thing, and we are actually dimensioning. When I click here and I click here, for instance, we're actually dimensioning the edges of the cabinet, but these are not necessarily the real edges. In this particular case, for instance, if I zoom in here, we can see that the red line that appears for the that is significant is not actually on a real edge of the cabinet. This is because this cabinet has two doors. We have a look at the doors here, and these doors have a certain thickness which are setting back the main cabinet shelves, main cabinet parts, by the thickness of the door, and the significant edge which the measuring tool is using is actually the outer limits of our cabinet, so be aware of that. We're now using here the outer limits of our cabinet. But this does enable us, what this does enable us to do is to say we click, for instance, on the outer edges here. We have here the permanent dimension which is given here, and if I click on the filler here, for instance, this is the filler which is also a cabinet, and I can get the dimension of the filler straight away here, 25. This tool is very useful is when you want to adapt a cabinet to a particular dimension of wall that is actually drawn in your project. For instance, if I need to adapt a cabinet to fit here along this particular wall section here, I will click here to here. I will get in, well, be careful because here I'm on the back edge, okay? So what I want is, be careful, I'm on the front edge here. Front edge, clicking up here, 160. Let's put that as a permanent dimension here, and we'll get 160 up here. And I can now drag in, for instance, be careful that you have to quit the measuring tool to start putting in cabinets. I drag in a cabinet unit here which will clip onto our wall here, and I can give it a width here of 1.60 m, looking at my measuring tool value here. And if I click 1.60 m and I create a new model, our model has been redimensioned to the main dimension that I've measured with the measuring tool, which is pretty neat function. Now we know this is exactly the right size for our second module here, which of course I can now go into and modify the shelves and everything according to my needs. It's been dimensioned using the measuring tool here, which is a really neat feature of the measuring tool. The measuring tool, if I put dimensions as permanent dimensions, I can view them or not view them here, permanent dimensions here, and when I go into our file print preview mode, the dimensions are actually shown, are printed on the project here, which is quite neat too, for general dimensioning of a project. So you'll get the dimensions of the cabinets and the walls, and the relative dimensions between the cabinets and the walls, which is a neat function and quite useful. But on the same time, be aware that we're not able to dimension the cabinets in the details of the cabinet itself. If you need to detail your cabinets, I suggest you take out a DXF file of your cabinet and you use that DXF file in a CAD program or something like SketchUp or DraftSight or AutoCAD, and you can add all the dimensions you need of all the details you need. If you're a member of our wood designer community, and you don't have the full versions of DXF versions of our software, don't forget that you can use our free 3D DXF service to get your free DXF 3D models. Thank you very much for looking at this little video, and I hope that it's been interesting for you, and I hope to see you soon in another video. Goodbye.